Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our podcast, Into Miyazaki's World. This is Betty, and I have with me here my co host and two other special guests. So, would you like to introduce about yourself, guys?
Hi, it's Avery.
Sarah.
Hi, Ryan.
Welcome, guys, to today's podcast. And if you listen to our previous episode, we actually saying that we would discuss Castle in the Sky in the next one, but yeah, we still do that, but we changed the order a little bit. So we realized that Porco Rosso has more connection to House Moving Castle, so we going to discuss about this movie first. So here we are today talking about Porco Rosso, and before jumping into the talk, I would like to give you guys a spoiler warning. As usual, that we are going to analyze a lot of details from the movie. So if you plan to watch it, we recommend you pause there, watch the movie, and then come back to us later. And but if you don't mind at all, I can just like give the spotlight back to my co-host Avery with the little summary of the plot. And yeah.
Yeah, awesome. For a synopsis, I have that Porco Rosso is a 1992 fantasy adventure film by Miyazaki. It follows a disillusioned pig bounty hunter during an interwar period in Italy. The plot mostly involves Porco's mission to fix his plane and regain his honor in the Adriatic Sea. He's accompanied by Theo, an 18-year-old aviation engineer prodigy. And so for this film in particular, there is a lot of historical context that I noticed, and so I was just kind of gonna contextualize a little bit of that. So for Miyazaki, a lot of this inspiration or just the setting of this movie is the interwar period following World War One, before World War Two. I don't think we're into the Depression yet. Maybe we're close to it. It's not exactly clear. We're somewhere in the 1920s, 1930s, Italy. And so, if anyone knows about the history of Italy, this is around the time where we see a rise in fascism and the far right authoritarian fascist party. And so that definitely plays a role in this film, as we'll discuss later. And so, for those who don't know, fascism is a far right, authoritarian, ultra nationalist political ideology. And so, it's usually characterized by a dictator leader, forcible suppression to opposition, and vast militarization. And so, during this time, this is when Benito Mussolini came into charge, and there is this idea of a new government is being ushered in that is referenced in the film. Um, and so we do see that influence. Something that is more fictional in the movie is this idea of sea sky pirates. Sky pirates over the Mediterranean or the Adriatic. And so some of my research is that this may kind of be inspired by the fact that we are coming up on the Great Depression, or maybe we're already in it in this setting. And so this would lead to more pirating, fueled by that economic crisis. So, yeah, and we can go ahead and dive into the discussion. Is there
Yeah.
anywhere you want to start, Betty?
I don't know. I just found some interesting fact. I think it would be better if I brought it up first before we jumping into analysis. So I found that this movie is actually originally planned to be an in-flight movie for Japan Airlines. So director Miyazaki just eventually expanded into a feature-length production with a serious tone talking about war because it's just right at the beginning of Yugoslavia wars. I don't know what that war is actually about, but yeah, it's about that war. And even though it's have a serious tone, Miyazaki just make it like very fun way, in a very fun way. So yeah.
Yeah, and kind of with that theme of war, when I was doing some research for this film, in general, we know that Miyazaki, he likes to touch on the environment. He likes to touch on, like, kind of this pacifist ideology when it comes to war. And so I did a little research, and yeah, so in 1992, or 1991 to 2001 is when the Yugoslavia wars occurred, which is what Betty was referencing. And so while the film is taking place in an interwar period of Italy, it is very much kind of like reminiscent of this Yugoslavia war that was occurring at the time of Porco Rosso's production. And in general, I actually, since we talked about Howl's Moving Castle last, my research said that the Iraq War, partly inspired Howl's Moving Castle, which we didn't even mention that, so I just thought that was kind of interesting to throw in there.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting to know. I just know about that when you brought it up. So yeah, so we touch war now. So maybe we can discuss a little bit about war at first. Or actually, I have a question for you guys because this movie is very impressed me at first when I first watched it. So what was your first impression about Porco Rosso based on the poster, maybe?
My first impression on the poster, or my first impression watching it?
Both.
Because I've seen this film maybe 4 or 5 times now.
Okay.
I really loved it. I think this one's super underrated in like the canon of Miyazaki. I feel like everyone talks about Howl's Moving Castle and Spirited Away and Princess Mononoke, and nobody really talks about this one. And it's really, really great. I think it's a lot of fun. There's a lot of like really fun action to it, and just like a good story to it too.
I think it's one of the funnier Ghibli movies
Yeah,
too.
that too.
Definitely.
Despite the serious theme, I was laughing a lot. Porco has a lot of good one-liners.
Yeah, I found it to be funnier than Hell's Moving Castle.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I mean, it was very cute. It was like light and just fun.
I think it's interesting because Sarah, I think, had a more positive perception of it going in because she was like, oh, it's a cute pig. For me, I was like, the main character is an animal. This is going to be silly.
That's the thing, is it's not.
Yeah.
Porco being a pig is the only like fantastical thing that happens in the whole film. Everything else, it could be just like an American made like drama or like action movie. The only like mystical thing is like, oh, the main character's a pig.
Yeah.
And everyone recognizes that he's a pig, which is funny.
Which I think that's why Betty was like the first impression of the poster. So for me, I'd never seen this movie before. So I was kind of like, oh, I don't know, it looks silly. I don't really personally like, what is it called? When you give animals human like personification. Not a big fan of that because I feel like normally it's very much for kids and it's silly. But then you watch it and you're like, wow, okay, I don't know if I would want a child of a certain young age to watch this actually because it is very serious. So I think, what is it? Appearances can be deceiving. I think I kind of judged it too quickly. It's really good.
Yeah, no, for real. For this one, I really don't want to watch it at first because of the poster as well. I just feel like it's mostly for kid. And Miyazaki on my side, actually, when I do the research, he said in the documentary that this film is very foolish for him because he think it was silly for him to make an adult movie for children to watch. So yeah.
Some of the research I did said that the film, I know you talked about like the Japanese air commercial or whatever that he was designing before. I think even before that, this film was based off this manga he had made. Yeah, called the Age of the Flying Boats. And so I think that in itself is supposed to be a little more silly, but when he adapted it to the film, you get those more serious elements that he's added and taken into account, like the current events, which was the Yugoslavia war for him.
I really liked it, honestly. Okay. My first impression of the main character being a pig, I was like, oh, that's cute, that's fun. I like whimsy, I like a good Zootopia sort of like kind of children's movie. But actually, as I was watching it, he wasn't as cute to me, because it's just like why he's outwardly a pig is just kind of it's showing how he is on the inside kind of outwardly. It's more, it's just showing how he is. And him being a pig wasn't as cute as I originally thought it was going to be.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, it's kind of like he has a Mandalorian essence to him. He's a bounty hunter and he's very disillusioned, disgruntled, jaded, whatever term you want to use.
The quick little summary I wrote of this movie is just like men are pigs and war turns men into pigs.
I like that.
Yeah. It's what you see like a lot, even in Howl's Moving Castle. It's like how the main character feels inside. It's like personified through how they look. Mm-hmm. It's like how they view themselves. You can really tell by kind of what they look like.
Yeah, I think a interesting distinction though between those two films is that in Howl's, it's this idea that war can turn you into a monster when you give into it and you lose your humanity. But in this, we kind of see the opposite, where Porco is more of trying to leave the war behind, but because of the trauma he went through, he has to kind of detach himself from his human emotions. And so it's kind of a reversal, like fully giving in to the battle and becoming that monster versus having already gone through it and trying to cope with the aftermath of feeling like, you've lost yourself.
Yeah, and I feel like with this movie, it's kind of like almost a different feel of war. In this movie, it's more like making money off of war. You've got like the pirates and the bounty hunters, but in Howl's, it's like more just like pure destruction kind of thing. And I think that's where why he's portrayed more as a pig is because he's making money off of the war, and Hal was portrayed more as a monster because it was like pure destruction. Do you know what I'm
I
saying?
think also it has to do with the fact that this is the interwar period, so this is the aftermath. This is the collateral for Porco, whereas Hal was in the middle of the war.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
But yeah, we're really getting into it, but maybe we should.
My bad.
No, you're okay. No worries. I was gonna ask, like, where do we want to start? Because we see a lot of themes here. We could start with, if we wanted to go straight into the meat of it, that would be a Porco analysis of his character. But what do y'all think? Where should we start?
Yeah, I don't know. Whatever you want. I kind of want to jump into the war because we kind of touched about that a lot. Like Sarah just analyzed it a little bit. So maybe I
With
don't
the
know.
political themes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I would just say, kind of reiterating a little bit of what we've already talked about, is this is an interwar period, and we're seeing the rise of fascism. And so, like, I have a quote where I don't even remember what character says it, but he's like, our island is in for a change of government. And there's this kind of idea that what Porco does, being a bounty hunter, and weapons dealers are soon to become illegal because the state is being taken over by this ultra nationalist group that is trying to dictate like civilian lives. And it's kind of this idea that you're either with the government or you're against the government.
Yeah, there is a quote whenever he talks to Ferrari in the movie theater.
I'd
Is that his
rather be a
friend's
pig
name?
than a fascist.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that and he was like, either you fight for Italy or you can't fly, basically.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like you're either with us or against us mentality, which I thought, I felt like that really played into what you were saying.
Yeah, I wrote a similar quote down. Because they like my pretty red plane, the problem is they don't like me flying it. And
Mhm.
they also kind of try to capture what his crimes are, and they seem so vague and confusing because at the end of the day, his crime is simply just going against the government. He's left,
Yeah.
he's abandoned his post in the Italian Air Force. They're claiming he's an anti-patriotic pig, which I thought that was funny.
Mhm.
But
I did too.
yeah. And I was kind of wondering, because this kind of goes with this political theme and like the government. So the silent film, when he's in the theater, did y'all like notice little like details of the film that they're showing?
I actually didn't, but what I did notice is that Porco said he didn't like it, but Ferrari was like, "This is a great movie." So
Yeah.
what was the film about?
Did you notice, Ryan?
It was there planes flying in it. I think.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So, and this didn't come from my brain. I watched a YouTube video, so to be fair. But yeah, it's kind of like a little small Easter egg. If you blink, you miss it. But the film is showing, it does have planes, and it's kind of like this damsel in distress that needs to be saved. Who does she need to be saved from? It's a pig. And so it's portraying like the pig, which could be Porco, who's against the government, in a bad light. And so then the handsome hero comes in and saves the damsel. So you kind of get why Ferrari's like, oh, like, I like this film because he's in the government and kind of on that side. He's not straying from the norm, whereas Porco is kind of this outcast of society. But he isn't a bad person, even though we can talk about this later. He claims he is, but he isn't to his core. And so I don't know, I just thought that was kind of like an interesting little thing in there. It was about him essentially and how the government is portraying him.
Yeah, propaganda. That's
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
Did you guys watch the sub and the dub of this?
I
I asked this
watched-
question last time.
I watched the dub.
I watched
I
it.
watched it up too.
Okay, I watched the dub as well. Does everyone like Michael Keaton as the pig?
He was the pig? Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah.
We got the Batmans. We got Christian Bale and House
Yeah.
of Castle and Michael
Oh,
Keaton.
yeah.
I don't know how I felt.
Because I switched back and forth a couple of times, and I was like, I really like hearing Michael Keaton as Porco.
Huh. I didn't actually notice that was him, but I did
Mhm.
like the voice because he's kind of supposed to be this edgy guy that's been torn down by the war and society to a certain extent, and you kind of get that ruggedness with his acting and his voice. So
His
I
voice
like
was
it.
surprising. I was expecting cute pig fun movie, so I don't know if I loved the voice because I was like, oh,
You wanted
okay.
Yeah, and you did
Zootopia.
not get that
I
at
was,
all.
it wasn't giving the Zootopia that I thought it was gonna give, but it's okay. Yeah.
I know Betty usually watches subs, so kind of how was that changed for you?
I don't know. I kind of like his voice into Porco, but for other characters, it's just weird for me. So I'm kind of being distracted at
Yeah.
some parts. But I think his voice fit very well with the characteristic that Porco just portray. So I think it's great to watch the dub this time.
And the person who's voicing Curtis also does a really good job of like being like a really
Yeah,
like
a
I am an
Texas.
American.
Yeah, I am an American.
Yeah.
I'm from Texas, so I was just like, I roll.
Yeah.
But I mean, some people really do sound like that, and this is kind of in the 1920s or 1930s, so
Well,
this
it
is
was
an
kind of
older
interesting
accent.
because when we were watching it as dub, it's like all of them had American accents, so it was kind of weird when it was like the guy with the country accent was the American. I don't know. I guess it would have been different in sub, but like, yeah.
Something that I'm like trying to slyly look up is that the actress that plays Gina in the dub, I may be wrong. Oh, I don't think I am. She plays Megra in Disney's Hercules. I knew I knew
Oh.
it from somewhere, and so that also means she plays Lynn in Spirited Away.
Mm.
So I was like, I knew her voice from somewhere, but I really like her voice casting as well. I think she's underrated. I don't know. She just kind of has like a sassy like voice. I don't know how to explain it, but yeah.
Was that Gina or Theo?
Gina.
Okay.
Gina. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I knew it was familiar. I wasn't sure, but I did look it up. So yeah, I guess I didn't know she was in more than one Studio Ghibli film because she was Lynn in Spirited Away, and so now I know she's Gina. I wonder if she's in any more, but I don't know. But yeah. But kind of returning to that political theme we were talking about.
Yeah, sorry, I got us off
Oh
topic.
no,
there.
it's okay. Something else I wrote down is that Porco makes some sort of comment like, or at first his friend is like, come back and fly for the Air Force. We can work it out. And he's like, I only fly for myself, which is just like kind of typical Porco. He's very elusive, stubborn. And then they point out something that I thought it was interesting is that he won't get a fair trial because he's a pig. And I'm kind of like wondering if y'all had like an interpretation on that.
I feel like it's just kind of like a reflection of the government and how they view people who don't conform to their beliefs, kind of. But you as a history major might know more about that than I
Speak
do.
your truth, Sarah.
To be honest, but yeah, that's how I saw it.
Yeah, same way, to be honest.
I don't although like he turned into a pig stuff is like really like not explained at all, which is like great, but it just like leaves it all up open for interpretation.
Yeah, I love that.
Absolutely. Because I think when we get into Porco's character analysis, there's an entirely different perspective on why he's a pig. But when we're viewing it within this political theme, it's because he's an anti-patriotic pig. Like, as they said, that's kind of how they're portraying it, I think. And then, of course, there's kind of like the gender answer, which is he's a bit of a womanizer.
There's quite a few different ways to look at it. It's really interesting.
And then I just had another example of this kind of new government being bad news for Porco and the Adriatic in general is that there's a reference that they're going to partner with the sea pirates, which is why he's going to be out of a job. So, it's just kind of sketchy. Are we partnering with bad guys? And then I love this quote. This one had me laughing. Where he goes, farewell to freedom in the Adriatic. And the guy's like, what is that, Shakespeare? No, it's Porco. I like that one, but yeah.
We all will be returning because I'll probably be on that episode as well, hopefully, if you guys have me back. We'll be talking about a lot of this in The Wind Rises as well, because it's like same time period. It's a Japanese engineer building planes for World War II.
Yeah.
And they do some traveling to Germany to build more planes, and there's like some more like secret police kind of stuff.
I like it because he goes to Italy and then he returns back to Japan. So he's kind of showing two different sides at the time. But
yeah.
And I think Betty, if you want to, you should mention that comparison that you saw between the two films with the hat.
Yeah, no, it just it's not related to political, but I think it's for more about the romance stuff. But yeah, I don't know. Should I mention it
No,
now?
I'm
Because
curious
we're talking
now.
about, we brought up The Wind Rises, so I thought it was a good time for you to reference it. If you
yeah,
want.
because I think it's kind of portray like a connection between the two characters with their love mate. Because in the Windrise, when the girl had just flew away, the boy catch it, and that's show their connection to get to know each other from that time. And for in this one, Theo and Porco already knew each other, but they never grew like any close connection yet. But from the time she just kissed him in the cheek, right?
Hmm.
Yeah, and then just her hat just float away. He catch it, and it's show again like connection. The ending is very open ending, but I hope that they're going to be like a couple actually after that time. So I think it's kind of some show somehow the love connection between those two because of the hat, and I just noticed it because I love that scene from The Wind Rise. So
Hmm.
yeah,
I just love the little like consistent details, like because we talked about this in so many episodes. Like that's attention to detail. He just like he connects things. I would say even better than Pixar and their little Easter eggs. In my opinion. But yeah, no, that's cool. So maybe we could move on to, or does anyone else have any last comments about the politics or war? Okay. I was thinking we could move on to maybe there's a few other topics here. I thought gender was a pretty big one, and then we could talk about Theo and Gina. So maybe we could start there. So yeah, what are y'all's thoughts on Gina?
I think
She needs to stop dating pilots.
All her pilot
Yeah.
boyfriends are dying.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. She needs to find a new profession to date. Seems like pilots are not working out.
I agree. She has like I think what's cool about this movie is that we know that Miyazaki in general, he likes to portray these strong female characters, and in this one where our main character is actually pretty misogynistic, he still is able to show like the strength of women, but within an appropriate context of the time period. And so like Gina's strengths don't lie necessarily in like physical strength or anything like that, but she has this womanly charm and this silver tongue, like the way she's able to maintain and run this business, where people that literally fight on the outside come in here, and she's able to keep it calm and stop fights from happening. Like I think that shows a lot of her character.
Yeah, and people that don't necessarily think much of women as well, as you can see throughout the movie, where they're like, "Oh, a woman's doing this type of thing."
Yeah.
They come to respect her and listen to what she has to say. Like, "Oh, don't fight in my restaurant." They actually listen to her.
Yeah, and that's kind of the cool like comparison between Gina and Theo, is that Gina is like this older, like established woman. Like she's cool, for lack of a better word, like she's cool. Whereas Theo is kind of this up and coming, and so she's a little more shaky. It's a little more unstable because she's younger, but she's ambitious and she's kind of trying to establish that same like level of respect and prestige that I think Gina already has. So it's kind of cool to see them like become friends at the end, because I would imagine that it's kind of like a mentor type relationship.
Yeah, and Theo seems to have that kind of same kind of power towards the end, although it's like not as like, as you put it, like silver tonguey. It's more like just yelling at the pirates, being like, "Hey, you're seaplane pilots. You need to respect the rules of being a seaplane pilot."
She's very intelligent,
Yeah.
for sure. And like from the first introduction to her, the mechanic, do you know his name, Sarah? Because you said you like looked up their names.
Piccolo.
Piccolo.
Yes.
Yeah, my boy Piccolo. Yeah, he's kind of hyping up his granddaughter. Maybe we can kind of talk about those first initial scenes, like with Theo, and like kind of the interactions between her and Porco, because it gets better.
Yeah.
Is the good point. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, for thinking about Gina and Theo, I just think of they represent two different like field of, I don't know what the words for it, but like they're in two different fields. Like Gina has a power in the art side, which is more about performance and singing, but Theo is more about the science side, which is more about engineering. And I don't know what is the difference when you guys think about the Western way or Asian way, but for me, when I grow up, Cyan is more about boy stuff. So it show like Theo just like have a different stand in this field. Just show like how her power grow up from that perspective. But for Gina, she grew up from the female like original field. So it's kind of, I don't know, it's interesting to see like different things that being portrayed in this movie like that.
Yeah, I agree. Theo's kind of trying to enter a male-dominated workforce. But I like this quote where she tells Porco, "Well, I can't help being a woman, but I got the talent," and that's just kind of her
Yeah.
attitude for, I would say, most of the film.
Yeah.
And then we kind of see her in her workspace, which we love Ghibli scenes where they portray like characters studying or working, just like kind of the passion. You can definitely see that Miyazaki is like pouring his own passion of him working on his work into the characters working on their own work. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I feel like there's a lot of Miyazaki in Porco as well, just like an old man who's like just contemplating his life and smoking cigarettes.
Yeah, I agree. And loves planes.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, you can really tell from like those scenes where Porco's meeting Fio and Piccolo and all of their family when they're building the plane that at this time where this movie is based, it's like there's a very clear distinction of this is what a man should do and this is what a woman should do, and a woman women shouldn't be building fighter planes. He literally says
they pray to God.
Yeah, he literally says we're not baking a cake here. Like whenever the all of the women in the family are building the plane, and then Piccolo says, "Forgive us for building a fighter plane made by the hands of women." So you can really tell there's like those set gender roles, and it's like they, especially Porco, does not trust a woman in this field, you know, and it's just kind of like that. Just I feel like a deep set sort of misogyny a little bit, especially with that time period, thinking, oh, women can't do this, men are the only people that can do this type of thing.
Yeah, and a small note on that scene you mentioned, I just find it interesting that Miyazaki takes the time to demonstrate Italian Catholicism, because that's very rooted in that culture, because me and Betty have talked about in previous films that there's a lot of Shinto influence, like in Spirited Away, and even when he's doing films that are based in more Western society, just the little like nudges at like, you know, there is religion here. It's just different. I thought that was cool. But yeah, yeah, I like that scene, even though it's very like, I don't know, it's sexist. It's a sexist comment, but it's funny still.
I mean, yeah, I mean, it was done in a light way, I feel.
Yeah.
But I really did like that scene because as they're building the plane, you could just see like they're all just like welding and sanding and putting it together, and I really do like how he animated it. It was like a very nice picture, and it just kind of shows the capabilities. Like they're able to get it done.
Yeah, and they're all in their like little old-fashioned dresses.
Yeah, even the grandmas with their hammers.
The grandmas are hilarious.
Yeah, adding to those kind of gendered stereotypes, I think the opening as well, all these little girls get like kidnapped and are held hostage, which is funny. It's funny that they're just like playing along and are just like excited to be kidnapped, but still kind of playing into the stereotypical, like kind of like you were talking about with
damsel in distress.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. But that's the cool thing, is that he does break that down throughout the film, because we see Theo actually saves Porco's life, essentially, rather than the reverse happening.
Mm-hmm.
So that was cool. You see that they kind of have this mutualistic relationship where originally Porco thinks he's going to be of no use to her. And, you know, she's like, are you leaving because I'm a woman or because I'm too young? He's like, it's both, kiddo.
Yeah.
So it's nice to see that the more he lets her in and allows her to help, she, you know, can actually make a difference. So
yeah, I like that. The character development is good.
yes.
Yeah, I really did enjoy that.
Yeah, and I think also Theo's I love Theo. Who doesn't? I just, you know, she's young, but she's a genius, as Porco says. And just her bravery when facing the pirates, even though she was scared deep down, but she's very clever about it.
Yeah, when Porco like stands up for her in front of all the pirates, like I feel like that's that real moment where he finally kind of addresses like respect for her and respect for what she does and her skill, and I feel like that's kind of a turning point in their relationship.
I agree.
Fio's a really great character, and I think it's almost like she would fit the mold of like a Miyazaki leading character, and she's just like kind of put in the background in this story. And it's interesting that inversion of what is usually seen in some of the other ones you guys have talked about.
Yeah, and it's cool because he still kind of promotes the same message, even though we're getting a different perspective on the message,
Yes,
essentially.
yes.
And I think Porco, ultimately, like Sarah says, ultimately does accept that maybe his way of thinking was wrong and limited. So we love to see that.
Mhm.
Yeah, no, I don't have much to say, but it's just very cool when you mention about a perspective switch in this movie because it just remind me of the saying I heard from somebody in my house, maybe, or maybe some other podcast about gender I heard. But they say like if you want to stop like the gender discrimination, the perspective has to change from both sides. So I think it's very interesting when you brought this up in this one.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I like it because, you know, it's sort of a like a whimsical, sort of like funnier take on stuff like that. And I feel like it does a good job of kind of portraying those serious messages, but in a lighter way. I really liked how it was done.
Yeah. And then something we didn't talk about is that she literally becomes president of the company at the end, which
Oh,
was
yeah.
really cool
Yeah.
to see.
It was kind of like at the very end, it was kind of like,
Yeah,
oh,
she
and
started narrating out of nowhere.
How do you guys feel about that ending?
Ooh.
It's very open ending for me. Like I think it's fit the movie very well because it's open as a diary at the very beginning where some I think caption in different language opening the
Yeah.
movie. So it's kind of like a diary and then it's finally end with Theo talking about what happening at the end. But it's still very open ending for me, but I think it's connect well with the opening. So
Very excited to get to when we start talking about Porco's analysis because I think I'll have more to say then. But I had a good transitional theme since we are talking about gender. I kind of came up with this theme. I'm calling it the bygone days. It's kind of like it's mostly has to do with Gina. This kind of idea of like the before the war days, the golden days. And so like an example, you kind of see that at the very beginning, kind of with her like singing. It's something about it is kind of like nostalgic and calm, and everyone's just kind of enjoying the time in the bar, and just how this bar in general is just kind of this place for people that are left out of this new era, this new regime that's taking over. So I don't know if y'all had any thoughts about that or if y'all know what theme I'm talking about, but
Kind of. There's like that things were better before almost.
yeah,
I
and
feel like that's
yeah.
something that is like touched on in some of his other films as well. I can't think of a specific example. I mean, I guess it would play into some of the like people are ruining nature kind of themes of like things were probably better before people started messing with, nature in the ways that we tend to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I can give some examples that I wrote down to like help strike up more discussion, but it mostly for me had to do with Porco and Gina's relationship and how it has changed because we kind of see that scene when they were younger that they used to just actually hang out and enjoy time, and it was kind of just a more peaceful time in their youth before Porco went to war and became traumatized, and Gina lost all of her husbands. So that's kind of what I'm trying to play on here, and just this, yeah, I don't know that idea, and then also kind of like the symbol of the garden. She wants him to return, kind of wanting to return to the old days, but
I think it's more of like he won't come in the daylight.
mm,
I think just kind of trying to like hide himself and hide his pigness
mm-hmm.
in the darkness, and that's why she's kind of like, I just kind of wait out here and hope that he comes in like the day, and that's kind of like, he's worked through his stuff and he can like come to me now.
Yeah.
you know
No, I like that. I think Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, we kind of see that when he does show up, it usually is dark, and he wants to eat alone. So she just ends up joining him without him asking her to. He
Mhm.
wants to be alone. He's punishing himself.
Yeah.
Yeah, she mentions hating the picture she has up of him, and it's like the last picture of when he was a human and he scratched out his face. I feel like there's like kind of an insecurity there. He just
Yeah.
doesn't really want to be seen.
Absolutely. I mean, we can go ahead and start talking about his
Yeah, I
character
think
analysis.
we've
Might as
already
well.
started.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know where to start.
There's a lot, yeah.
Yeah, I guess our first introduction to him, we just know that he's kind of like this little morally gray character, right? Because the hostages are these little girls they've been taken, and he's just like, seems a little disinterested
He's like,
and
"I'm
annoyed.
busy.
Yeah,
I'm
he's
busy, like lounging on the beach."
He's like, I guess I'll just got to get this job done quick and over with.
I love all the little girls. Just like, yay, we get to be kidnapped, pirates, yay! And they're just like having a good time, and they're just like crawling all over
yeah.
them, and just
Yeah.
like, oh, fun, we get to like shoot the gun now.
And the pirates are kind of cute too, because they're
Yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah.
they're like, oh, we might as well take them all. We can't separate them from
them
their
from their
friends.
friends.
I loved that. I was like, oh yes, this is so cute. So yeah.
I actually kind of it's a very like miniature theme around that. It goes with this idea that they're really desensitizing like violence in nature, and I feel like that did I say nature? I don't know why I said that. Violence and war. And I feel like it has to do with this kind of post-war context. Like, the villains are ridiculous. Because if you imagine these things in real life, do you think a bunch of little kids, like you said, are going to be swarming around like, hee, like there's guns, and oh, Porco's going to get you? Like, no,
Yeah.
like you'd be afraid for your life. So I think the film was kind of making this comment on how, as a society, we've just become so like nonchalant towards like violent acts. But maybe that's just a bit of a stretch. But
It also
No,
just
that
like
was good.
lightens the action of
Yeah.
like, this is fun. It's not like
Yeah.
serious. Like, they're not in real danger. There's no stakes, essentially.
No, I agree. And I think we see this elsewhere in the film, or at least to me, even like when Fio wants to go along, she's really kind of underestimating the danger that this might bring for her. And like the grandmother is like, oh, bring me back souvenirs. Like it's some sort of like vacation.
Yeah, and he's like, oh, you can come, just like take that big machine gun out so you can fit.
Oh my
And
God.
it's like, okay.
Yeah, it's the irony of that. But yeah, no, and then also I think the biggest scene where we see like this dramatizing violence, which why that's a harmful thing, is the big dog fight at the end. Porco's first off, his quote is, "Bunch of morons, they're turning this into a party." And then as the fight ensues, they almost like kill people that are trying to like place bets and like enjoy it like it's entertainment. It was kind of giving me like this gladiator fight idea where like the Roman elites, they're just enjoying it. They're watching these people literally slaughter each other, and they're like, yeah, I bet on this guy. It gave me similar vibes.
Yeah, I got the same feeling from that. Definitely there is a desensitization for those people in that time period.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then they sort of crash down and start like fighting each other.
Yeah.
Yeah. In like an old timey, like, I punch you once and then you punch me once, and then just kind of go
it
back and
was
forth for a
very
little
like
bit.
Looney Tunes, like
Yeah,
Tom
yeah.
and Jerry. It was cartoonish.
Oh yeah. It's just funny because like if this was an American film, kind of like Ryan was saying, like it would not be depicted in this manner. It would be much more gritty. Like even their injuries looked silly. They had like black eyes, but they were like all goofy
Like
looking.
the bumps, like
Oh,
the,
yeah.
like-
It is Tom and Jerry-esque. I like that.
Mhm.
And then I just had this other quote that I wrote down when the announcer is like, "Don't kill us, kill each other." Like it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's entirely ridiculous. And so I'm so sorry. Okay. That was my phone. Where were we? But yeah, no, I don't know. It's do we think that they're doing this because is he actually trying to like kind of point fun that we are becoming desensitized to the violence, or is this more for a comedic effect to make the movie more lighthearted? Like, what do we think?
I think it could be both. And I like that there's that, like, you kind of get to interpret it for yourself. I like he does that a lot, where it's like you can kind of choose to see it in a bunch of different ways, and they all could be kind of right. So
Yeah.
I think it's a little bit of a mix.
For sure. And returning to that scene that Ryan brought up where they're just like punching each other, I'd put this under the theme of honor, which they talk about. It's really only focused on in like the last half of the movie. Me and Betty were kind of talking about that, but to me, that fist fight is just kind of like a pure example of like honor and that there's like a proper way to do things, like just a good old fair wrestling match. You know, they go back to their own corners. There's no cheating. The pirate thug leader, who seems so like he has no morals at the beginning of the film, now even he is like, all right, nobody fight dirty. And he's
Yeah.
even cheering for Porco, his mortal enemy.
I mean that's kind of the speech that Theo gives to all of them of like, you guys are just like gonna gang up on Porco. You're not gonna like fight him in the air or like do this properly, and like the idea of like doing things the way they're supposed to be done. Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like he starts to cheer for Porco because Curtis, the American fighter pilot, he's willing to actually shoot to kill, and he like shoots kind of almost into the crowd, like potentially injuring people, but Porco, he is not willing to seriously hurt Curtis for any reason. So I feel like that was honorable, and that's why the main head pirate boss dude was like, I can side with that, you know.
Yeah, I really like, I don't know if this is the right term, but would Curtis be a character foil for Porco? Is that when it's like kind of an opposite?
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think so. It's been a while since I was in like a English class, but I feel like Curtis, as his character, he works so well in that he's the counterposition to everything that Porco is encompassing in the film. And so when we talk about honor, well, Porco's is honorable. Curtis is very much dishonorable. He's the foolish American who is, what did they say at one point? They're like, he's flying in the sun, and they're like, typical American. And I definitely feel like that was like a little Icarus, moment. His ego is inflated. Kind of spells his doom from the beginning.
Yeah, and falls in love with every woman he's seen.
Oh God.
Yeah. Yeah.
What do you think about that, Betty?
I don't know. Just very funny for me for seeing this character. I didn't write a lot here because I don't have a lot of things to say, but I did write down like Curtis is not dishonorable, and he's unfair when he just like trying to shoot Porco plans in Porco too. When Sarah mentioned about that, but for Porco, like what the what's his name? The seaplane pilot just making some comment about a fight. He mentioned like Porco never like shoot the pilot, but he rather than shooting the plane instead. So I think it's like an honor action. Yeah, honor action that you guys just brought it up. And yeah, I only have a few notes here, so yeah.
Yeah, I feel like that could also be because of kind of his trauma and survivor's guilt. From what had happened previously when he was in the military, where he saw like all of his unit die and even the enemy, and kind of had some sort of like vision of them all like going to, I guess, pilot heaven. I don't know.
Yeah.
I feel like it's partially that as well.
And that's such a big scene. The pilot heaven,
I know,
as you
was
called it.
so interesting.
Yeah, I mean, we could talk about that for a moment because this is really what defines Porco, this moment, which we don't even find out until later. So we're really like, what's wrong with this guy? Why
Who
is he
hurt him?
disillusioned? And something that I was thinking about why watching the film is that you get this sense that Porco he's definitely running from something. He's an avoidant. And so like when the pirates, they want to fight him, he's just indifferent. He's just like, forget it. I'm going to Milan. My plane's not working anyways. And that's when he runs into Curtis. But and then even when Curtis is attacking him, he's just trying to get out of there. Like he doesn't care to fight. He's running, and it reminds me of Hal, because Hal is literally conjured up a moving castle to avoid his problems, because Ghibli characters will do anything but go to therapy. But yeah, and so Hal's motivation, we talked about last time, lies in his fear. And so I was kind of like, what's Marco's motivation? What is he running from? And so we can talk about that scene if y'all want.
Yeah.
We're all just like,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, I can like remind us. I can remind us of the scene. So, yeah, it's during the war. He's talking about how he's seeing friends and enemies falling around him like flies, and then he passes out, I guess, was my understanding. And so then the plane miraculously starts flying itself. It goes above the clouds, and he's kind of just sitting there for a while, and then he sees these other planes, but they go up to join this stream of other planes, which at first I thought it was stars.
Me too.
And you know when you get knocked out in like cartoons, you see stars? It's kind of what that reminds me of. I think maybe Porco here is having like a brush with death. Maybe this is like his glimpse at the afterlife, maybe, of the pilot.
I think it's a little bit of what Sarah was talking about with like the survivor's guilt. And I think also mixed in with like starting to realize like the costs of war and what he's doing. And that's, I think, before that moment, he's not a pig. And then after that, he is, I think,
Yeah.
is how that timeline works. So I think it's that moment kind of works as like the transition period of like he starts to see himself and the actions that he's done in the past as pig like, and then like sort of turns into a pig.
Yeah, and I think that scene is very interesting for me. Like you get just mentioned about the post-war trauma. So it's very different from other Ghibli movie that the character usually being cursed by other character. But for this one, Marco just turned into a pig because of his trauma. So it's somehow show like his insecurity about what he has been through and loss of confidence, or maybe like what's the word, feeling guilty about
Mhm.
what happening. So maybe yeah, I just wrote here like he doesn't believe that he is a good guy. Like you guys just mentioned, he always
Yeah.
repeat like the good guys always die, but he's alive. So
Yeah, and he has another quote where he's like, "Is Porco Rosso dead or alive?" And he says, "Good question," because it's kind of like he's trying to figure out
yeah,
that too. He's kind of lost all purpose. That's the point of calling him
Yeah.
disillusioned. Um, and for me, I think it's interesting that I feel like there's kind of two interpretations here, where it's like he's seeing his past actions as pig-like. He feels like a coward. He thinks it should have been him that died and not his best friend, who we know was like getting married to, or had just married Gina at the time. But I think it's also because after this scene, he kind of cuts off like his access to his own emotions. He doesn't know how to love, and he doesn't want to. He doesn't want to get attached. And so that's kind of where like Theo and eventually Gina comes in, where they kind of have to like break that down. And I like that Betty mentions that it's a curse that he's quite literally put on himself. And he says life as a pig is the same thing as hell. So he really is trying to punish himself.
Yeah, it's you can definitely tell that that's the moment that he starts to view himself like that. Like that's where he transitions and that he realizes that oh he had three guys on him and he only thought about himself, and then before he knew it all of his unit was dead and he was the last one left, and he said the good guys were the ones who died. Maybe I'm dead and my life as a pig is hell. So
Yeah.
yeah, definitely his outer view, how he's portrayed is kind of how he feels inside about himself.
This brings me back to a conversation he has with Theo, where he tells her, "I only look out for myself." And she says, "But you were a hero during the war, right?" And he doesn't answer this. Um,
yeah, and we can see a lot of scene where he just keep going with what he's believe about himself rather than next like get it rather than letting everybody opinion to get into his mind. So there's one scene when Theo trying to encourage him from the war. Maybe they from what's that scene where they are in his hideout. Theo just tried to encourage him about his story of all what happening in the war, and she just said like God was telling you it wasn't your time yet. And his response would just like seem to me he was telling me I was a pig and maybe I deserve to be all alone. So it's kind of similar to how he always trying to believe what he believe rather than listening to other people to improve.
and I think the sad thing here is that how, because of the whole like weird time travel scene, has like hope that one day he will find this woman that says that she knows how to save him. Porco doesn't really have that same hope, and I think that's why it's harder for him to let people in than it seems Hal was in Howl's Moving Castle.
Yeah, he doesn't start to get that hope until he meets like Theo again. And one of the quotes whenever he was talking about his past and like the whole event with his unit, he said, well, seeing you makes me wish I never gave up being human. So it's like he's finally kind of having that person in his life to kind of take him out of that really bad cycle of thinking that, oh, I'm terrible, I'm a pig type of thing. And kind of like how Hal had it. I mean, he had more of like a support system with Markle and Calcifer, but this is kind of like his Porco's Markle and Calcifer and Sophie kind of thing.
Yeah, and that actually, you mentioning that quote, there's a very similar quote that has to do with like honor. So he's not, he's viewing himself as a pig. He's also thinking he's selfish and dishonorable and all these things. And Theo tells him, well, you have more honor, like in reference to the pirates. And he says something like, well, when it comes out of your mouth, it doesn't sound that bad.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
we do
definitely.
start seeing kind of like a change in his perspective. But, at first he's very resistant
Yeah.
to letting people in.
I
And
literally wrote,
yeah.
he's healing.
I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think part of the issue, or not issue, part of the benefit here is that Theo she's ballsy, she's ambitious, and she's not going to take no for an answer. She basically is like, you're taking me, it can be as a hostage, I don't care. Like, I'm coming. I wonder if Gina had the same tenacity, if this could have, like, been an earlier epiphany for him. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think it seems like she kind of does. She just like hops on the like plane really quickly when she hears that like the Italian Air Force is like coming to where the fight is happening. It seems like she has that similar kind of drive, but up until the like start of the film, she doesn't really have it. She isn't directing that attention towards Porco because she's had these other pilots that she's been dating or married to, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a little confusing there.
Yeah.
I mean, and I don't know the exact context of it, but being a single woman during this time period, I don't think is very ideal. Like, society's going to judge you and you don't have like a lot of security with that. So I would imagine there's kind of this pressure to get married again.
Yeah, I feel like especially in that type of society, it's like your worth is kind of valued by the man you're married to, kind of thing. So, yeah, definitely not like an advantageous position to be in, to be kind of a single woman in that sort of era.
Absolutely. And I think since we're continuing to make this like Howl and Porco comparison, do y'all remember the scene where Theo actually sees him without the curse, but it's just for a moment?
Yes.
Yeah. What do y'all think of that?
It was giving Sophie.
Sorry.
I don't know, but I think it's kind of opposite way because is that opposite way? Because of in Howl's Moving Castle, Hal sees Sophie turning into like a very young lady, but for here is Theo seeing like that man into a man. So I don't know. You guys can go ahead. I need to like organize my thoughts somehow, but yeah.
I haven't seen Howl in a long time. I kind of see it as like she's seeing him as she sees him.
Mm-hmm.
Usually, what he's presenting is what he feels he looks like on the inside, and for a moment, she's kind of getting that he's a good person. He doesn't look like a pig all the time.
I agree with that interpretation. I think when I was doing my research, I saw that some people think this is a sign that like his curse is related to his mental perception of himself, which I do think it is, but like these other theories kind of made it seem like the curse is starting to fluctuate and come off. But I agree with that theory more. I think it's more Theo seeing him rather than him kind of like losing the curse for an instant.
I mean,
guess.
it could be that too, because she's been so encouraging of like, you shouldn't see yourself as a pig because that's not how you are. And that's not how I see you. And she's starting to break down that perception that he has of himself. Yeah.
Their relationship is very sweet.
I had a question about that just because I've been watching The Last of Us and that's been on my mind. Why do you think these like pseudo father-daughter relationships are so present in films? and stories, and not so much a like mother-son relationship, like a pseudo relationship where there's like an old man and there's like a young girl.
Okay, can I go first?
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
go
Okay,
for
I
it.
think it's because usually in real life you have a close relationship with your mother, but with a father it's a lot more detached, and a lot of people are missing like a good close relationship with a father, and that's kind of probably why we see it in films, kind of like a, oh, this is a father figure type of thing. I really think it's probably
You
that.
said daddy issues. That's why.
Yeah,
I agree, and I'm actually going to take a little more cynical route. I think it's rooted, since there is this misogynistic presence in this movie. I think of the Lolita archetype. I think that we have been, as a society, drawn to this idea of pairing the like more conventionally attractive woman with the more disillusioned, gruntled older man, and he needs this like young spark to like reinvent himself almost. That's kind of how I view it. I don't think I in no way don't think The Last of Us is doing that, because I think Joel and is it Ellie? Is that her name? Ellie's relationship, from what I remember, it's been a long time since I played the game, but I feel like theirs was more like a pure like. I didn't think there was anything weird going on there, but kind of Betty made a comment earlier, like, I hope they get together. That's what I'm saying. There's a weird Lolita like aspect here, and like the mechanic being like, you like my daughter?
Don't touch her.
Yeah, don't touch
Yeah.
her. And then at one time he was like, well, the Porco's like, I don't see the resemblance. Are you sure this girl's your granddaughter? And he's like, keep away from her. Like,
Yeah.
I feel like this is a different father-daughter relationship than in The Last of Us, in my opinion.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I can agree with that too.
Yeah,
Definitely.
I can see that as well. I just was something that I noticed that relationship
Yeah.
seems to appear a lot in a lot of different mediums.
I think Sarah's explanation fits The Last of Us
Mhm.
a lot more. I
Mhm.
think it fits in here a little bit too, but I think there's too many sexual like context here
Yeah,
where it's a little
bit yucky.
weird, and I feel like it's related to the time period, to be quite honest, in this Lolita trope that we've
Yeah,
seen.
because she's 17. I remember she mentioned that. Oh,
Yeah.
I'm 17. Yeah.
That's why I kind of want to know why Betty. I'm sorry. You think that you see love in them?
Yeah. I don't know. I didn't notice about the ages until you guys brought that up. But yeah, it's kind of weird now, but I don't know.
Because
Yeah.
the ending kind of leaves it off as like Theo is saying, you know, her and Gina remained friends, and as to, you know, Gina's little promise that she made herself, that's like our little secret. And I just really enjoy that like kind of wink and nod that like he eventually, you know, came around, but her just like kind of keeping it to herself.
That's entirely how I saw that too. Also, there's like this end comment after the fight. I think Curtis basically tells him, "You're gonna have to choose
Yeah,
a
yeah.
woman or whatever." And I didn't even feel like it was a competition. I feel like Theo kind of like idealizes Porco in certain ways, but I don't think Porco views her that way, or at least I think he tries very hard not to. I think he's meant to be with Gina, not just because it's age appropriate, but because of their history.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I feel like it's more like he's trying to protect her, kind of like in sort of a fatherly way. Like he
Yeah.
doesn't want to like to have her be with somebody who is not deserving of her, like how Curtis is, you know, because he's
Yeah.
throwing himself at every woman out there, you know. So I think I viewed it as more like that. Like it's a kind of a bit of a protecting guardian sort of thing.
Speaking of Curtis, I like it when Gina calls him out. And she's like, love is a little more complicated here than in America.
Yeah.
Falling in
Yeah.
love happens to you all the time. Go back to Hollywood, little boy.
I liked that.
I love Gina. She's great. Yeah.
I don't know if you looked into this at all, Avery, your history stuff. But were like seaplane pirates like a thing?
Okay,
Were they like prominent enough that like a cruise liner just like has planes ready to go to like fight off these pirates?
I will say that Google bamboozled me, because when I was looking it up, I picked on like the first article that came up, and I was like, "What? It is a real thing?" And then I realized this was like a fandom article. So no,
Oh,
it is
okay.
not real. And I'm very gullible for believing it for those few minutes that I found that article and was reading it. I was like, "Oh my god, I can't believe like I didn't think they had this kind of like technology or capabilities." And then eventually I realized that was a fandom wiki page. You're dumb. So no, it definitely was not a real thing. I mean, I do think there was probably this idea of I don't like not plain sea pirates, but maybe sea pirates are just it's we're coming up on the cusp of the Great Depression, so I do think there's this idea that there's going to be an increase in criminal activity because people don't have money.
Yeah.
So like kind of like a Bonnie and Clyde reference. I don't know.
Mhm. Yeah. Okay. I was just curious if that was a real thing, just because I thought it was funny. They're like, all right, if you'll look to your right, we've got pirates.
And that's that desensitization of danger
Yeah.
again.
Mhm,
Porco's like, are you kidding? Why are you in the Adriatic? It's dangerous.
Yeah.
Have you guys seen Captain Phillips?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very interesting seeing that portrayal of pirates compared to this. Have you guys? No.
No.
Okay, well, was it based on a real?
I think so. I want to say so.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, it's a movie with starring Tom Hanks, and he's the captain of a ship, and they are like pirates they take over the ship, and it's a scary movie. It is very tense, and it's not like pirates are taking over the ship type of thing. It's like I feel like it's probably a truer representation
Huh.
of how that would actually be, and I do think this movie it's kind of like a desensitization of that, because I feel like that's definitely a serious like
Absolutely.
we might not make out of this alive type of thing, but I was curious if you guys had.
Oh.
Yeah. It did really happen. It was like a shipping. It was like a container ship that was just like boarded by Somalian pirates in the. I'm probably off the African coast in like 2009, and they made it into a movie.
That's
Very interesting. You guys should watch it.
All right.
It's a good movie.
Yeah.
Put on my list. Just because I know Betty's gonna have to leave
Oh,
soon
yeah.
for work. I feel like we've covered a lot, so I kind of have like just one small little last conversation, which has to do with are you guys aware that Miyazaki is just like he loves planes and he loves aviation?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that's pretty established. I believe, is it his father or his uncle? I think he had a relative that like owned.
His dad.
It's his dad.
Yeah.
That did they manufacture planes? Do you know? Or was something along
I
those
think
lines?
he designed planes,
Yeah.
if I remember correctly. I could be completely wrong.
I
But
think that's
I
right.
think that he designed planes, and that's how he got into it, and like always saw like his father working, kind of like we see Theo working here. Like that's something that he saw a lot when he was growing up, and just seeing all these like drawings of
Yeah.
planes just like splayed out. Again, you'll see like a ton more of that in The Wind
Yeah.
Rises, because it's literally centering around a character who just designs planes. So
That I think it's just such a great thing, because I think for Miyazaki, I almost feel like we kind of like glimpse his like inner child here, exploring something that he always loved and he didn't get to do, but within his work he's still finding a way to incorporate it, because like the detail and the rendering of the planes in the film are very nice and very detailed. And like the scene where he's talking to Theo and like they were like talking about stuff that went way over my head, like he knows what he's talking about, which yeah, I don't know. I just kind of like the details, and how Porco's willing to risk it all for his pretty little red plane. It's badass. But yeah. And then also, that Betty noticed this. I don't know if y'all two did, but the engine of his plane says Ghibli.
yes.
So
Oh, really?
little Easter egg, but
Easter egg.
yeah. Just think it's cool.
Yeah. No, I think I lost you guys there. I was distracted a little bit, but yeah. So talking about aviation dream that Miyazaki just had, like you can mention, I did some little research on it. So yeah, like what you say, he witnessed his family just drawing plan and making it all the time. So it's create some dreams on him. And I think this movie portray clearly his passion about the airplanes, but I think it's more clearer on the Wind Rise, like what Ryan just said. But on the references about the aircraft and the comedy, the airplane comedy in the movie is actually based on the real one. So I think it's kind of cool. And yeah, as Avery mentioned, I noticed the Chipley one. So it's also appear on the engine, and it is how the name of studio come from. It's from the nickname of the real engine. It's called Caproni, CA 309. I think it's an Italian aircraft from World War II. So yeah,
I love that.
just quick comments. Yeah.
Cool.
Little details. And then like a final or one of our last comments is that he's like the plane is special. It's kind of like the hero's journey. Like the hero has like this weapon that only he can master. That's his plane. He talks about how it's the only one made like that, and that it was really dangerous, so they decided to scrap it. But it's his baby. And
But
I
he's able to fly it.
yeah, it builds credibility and kind of shows us why he's our central protagonist, I think. Yeah. So, does anyone have any final comments? And then we can like we always do like a little rating debrief thing.
I don't. We can rate it now if you guys want to. So, on a scale of 5, how would you grade it?
I'm gonna give it a 5. It was pretty up there for me. I think part of it is the surprise because I really underestimated the movie. Just looking out, I was like, oh, this is gonna be silly. Really enjoyed it. I love good historical context. I like a good jaded main character. I actually like it when films don't shy away from making a morally gray character because he's extreme. He makes pretty sexist comments, but you love to hate or hate to love him. I don't know, whatever the saying is. I kind of like that. It makes it complex. It makes it nuanced. It makes it interesting. So I 5 out of 5.
4.5. It's really good. I think, like you said, the first time I watched it, I was like really surprised by it, and every time I've rewatched it since then, it's just been like really fun to watch, and it's like 90 minutes, which is perfect. Love movies that it can like tell a whole story and get in and out in 90 minutes. So
Yeah, I'm gonna say probably like a 4 or 4.5 because it was silly, but it still had a deep meaning, and I really liked it. And I feel like the plane like heaven scene, that was great.
Oh,
It was
yeah.
so well done. So yeah.
Yeah, I would say 4. For me, this movie is not very standout, and it's also my first time watching it. I feel like I enjoy it, but I don't know. Oh, I don't have a lot of things to say about this movie, and maybe because I watching it in a not good time. I was sick, so I just dozed off during the movie. I was like, "What happening?" So maybe yeah, I don't know,
Oh.
just 4 out of 5, or maybe I can rewatch it and then rate it later. But yeah,
In a future episode, catch Betty's reevaluated rating. But yeah, that's all we have for today. Like we said, we already kind of picked out the film for the next one. We'll do Castle in the Sky, Wind Rises, and then we'll move on from Miyazaki Ghibli to Miyazaki non-Ghibli, and then back to Ghibli non-Miyazaki. So it's been a journey. We enjoy doing it. So
yeah. Well, thank you so much for listening today, and stay tuned. We're going back with Castle in the Sky.
Yeah.
All right.
bye.
Bye.
Bye.